So today, I'm not here to hand you answers or tell you exactly what to believe. That's not the goal. What actually matters is something deeper than that. I want to show you how to think for yourself, because once you truly understand that skill, everything changes. Problems don't feel as heavy, obstacles don't feel permanent, and the future stops feeling like something random. It becomes something you can shape. A lot of people struggle, not because they lack intelligence or work ethic, but because their thinking patterns are working against them. It's not about how talented you are. It's about how you approach situations in your own mind. Look around for a second. Everywhere you go, people are frustrated. They're unhappy with their jobs, annoyed about money, blaming the system, blaming their circumstances, even blaming luck. And sure, some of those complaints might be valid. Life isn't always fair. But here's the part most people don't want to hear: complaining doesn't move anything forward. It's easy to sit there and say things are unfair. Anyone can do that. But what does it actually produce? Nothing useful. It drains your energy, wastes your time, and keeps you exactly where you are. The people who actually get ahead don't spend their time stuck in that loop. They notice problems, sure, but then they do something about them. If something's broken, they try to fix it. If they don't like where they are, they start figuring out how to change it. And even if they can't change it right away, they start moving in a direction that leads somewhere better. That shift right there, from focusing on the problem to focusing on a solution, is where everything begins to turn. Every major company, every innovation, every breakthrough started the same way. Someone saw an issue and decided not to just live with it. They chose to build something instead. Think about it. Platforms like Facebook didn't come from someone just complaining about losing touch with people. It came from someone deciding to create a better way to connect. Airbnb didn't exist because people kept whining about hotel prices. It happened because someone saw a gap and acted on it. That's the pattern. The biggest ideas didn't start with complaints. They started with action. Now, let's be real for a moment. Life doesn't hand everyone the same starting point. Some people are born into comfort, connections, and opportunity. Others have to fight for every step forward. That's reality. But the people who eventually succeed aren't the ones who sit there focusing on what they didn't get. They focus on what they can do next. That's the difference. Next time you catch yourself complaining, pause and ask a better question: what can I actually do about this? Even if the answer is small, even if it's just one step, it's still progress. And progress, no matter how slow, beats staying stuck. Your mindset shapes everything. If you stay stuck in negativity, it limits you. But if you train yourself to think creatively, to look for possibilities, suddenly things start to open up. The people who go far in life aren't the ones who never face difficulties. They're the ones who refuse to let those difficulties define them. If you want things to change, you can't sit around waiting for someone else to fix it for you. No system is going to suddenly become perfect. No boss is going to magically double your income overnight. That's just not how it works. But you do have control over what you do next. And the moment you shift your focus away from problems and towards solutions, you start seeing opportunities that were always there but you just weren't noticing. Now here's another reality people don't like to accept. Everyone wants success, but not everyone is willing to wait for it. We live in a time where people expect everything instantly. Fast money, quick wins, overnight recognition. But real success doesn't happen like that. The things that actually matter take time. Every meaningful achievement is built slowly, over years of consistent effort, patience, and long-term thinking. Look at companies that dominate today. They didn't appear out of nowhere. They were built step by step, often with years of uncertainty in between. When Amazon first started, it wasn't some giant empire. It was a simple idea, and for a long time, it barely made money. People doubted it. Some even laughed at it. But the vision behind it wasn't short-term. It was focused on what it could become over time. That's where most people go wrong. They focus only on what's right in front of them. They choose what feels good now instead of what will matter later. They want quick results instead of lasting growth. And because of that, they end up quitting too early. If you only think about today, you'll keep chasing temporary satisfaction. You'll avoid challenges that could actually help you grow, just because they don't pay off immediately. But the things that truly matter, skills, knowledge, reputation, strong relationships, those take time. There's no shortcut around that. Think about it like planting something. You don't put a seed in the ground and expect results the next day. You give it time, you stay consistent, and you trust the process. But a lot of people don't do that in their own lives. They start something, don't see instant results, and walk away from it. That's why they stay stuck. Patience isn't just a nice trait to have. It's a requirement if you want to build anything meaningful. Now, if you really think about it, the difference between people who eventually succeed and those who keep starting over isn't talent. It's not even luck most of the time. It comes down to one thing: how long they're willing to stay committed when things aren't exciting anymore. Because that's the phase nobody talks about. The slow part. The quiet part. The part where it feels like nothing is happening. If you can stay focused during that phase, you're already ahead of most people. So ask yourself something honestly: where are you trying to go? Not just next week or next month, but years from now. 5 years. 10 years. If you don't have a direction, you'll keep drifting, reacting to whatever shows up instead of actually building something. The people who make real progress are thinking long-term, even when they're doing small, simple things daily. They understand that what they're doing right now is stacking up, even if it doesn't feel impressive yet. You always have a choice. You can keep chasing quick wins and restarting every time something gets hard, or you can commit to something bigger and give it the time it actually needs. Now let's talk about something that stops a lot of people before they even get close: failure. Most people are afraid of it. They avoid it, try to play safe, and when it happens, it hits them hard. They start questioning themselves, their abilities, their chances. But here's the truth: failure isn't the opposite of success. It's built into the process. Every person you look up to has gone through it. Not once or twice, but over and over again. The difference is, they didn't treat failure as the end. They treated it as information. When something doesn't work, you're learning. You're adjusting. You're getting sharper. But most people don't see it that way. They fail once and immediately take it personally. They assume it means they're not good enough, not smart enough, not capable. So they stop. That's where they lose. Because failure isn't telling you to quit. It's showing you what needs to change. Think about it like this: if everything worked perfectly the first time, you wouldn't grow. You'd stay at the same level. It's the mistakes, the missteps, the things that go wrong that actually push you forward. There are countless examples of this. People who tried again and again before something finally clicked. Not because they were special, but because they didn't walk away too soon. And that's the part that matters. If you shift the way you look at failure, it stops being something to fear. It becomes something useful. Instead of asking, "What if this goes wrong?" ask, "What can I learn if it does?" That one shift changes everything. Every time something doesn't go your way, you gain experience. You understand more. You see things you didn't notice before. And that puts you in a better position the next time you try. It's like learning anything new. You don't get it perfect on the first attempt. You try, you mess up, you adjust, and over time it starts to come together. But as people grow older, they lose that mindset. They start worrying about how they look, what others think, whether they'll be judged. So they stop trying new things. They stay where it's comfortable. And comfort feels good in the moment, but it keeps you stuck. Growth doesn't happen there. If you're always choosing the safe option, always avoiding risk, you're not really moving forward. You're just maintaining. And there's a cost to that. Because while you're staying the same, the world keeps moving. Opportunities pass. Other people improve. And over time, the gap gets bigger. So if you want to actually grow, you have to accept that things won't always go smoothly. Some attempts will fail. Some plans won't work out. That's normal. What matters is that you keep going. Now there's another piece of this that people underestimate a lot: the people around you. Your environment has more influence on you than you probably realize. The way people think, talk, and act starts to rub off on you over time. If you're constantly around negativity, excuses, and low effort, it's going to affect you, even if you don't notice it right away. On the other hand, if you're around people who are driven, focused, and trying to improve, that energy pushes you in a different direction. It raises your standards. Think about it. If everyone around you is aiming higher, working harder, thinking bigger, it becomes normal for you too. But if the people around you are always complaining, avoiding responsibility, and staying stuck, it becomes easy to fall into the same pattern. That's why your circle matters so much. You don't have to be surrounded by perfect or highly successful people. That's not the point. What matters is their mindset. Are they trying to grow? Are they willing to improve? Do they challenge you in a good way? Because those are the people who will actually make a difference in your life. At the same time, you have to be honest with yourself about certain relationships. Not everyone is going to grow with you. Some people will stay where they are, and if you're not careful, they'll hold you there too. That doesn't mean cutting people off without thinking. But it does mean recognizing when someone's influence is pulling you in the wrong direction. And being willing to create some distance if needed. Also, it's not just about what you receive from others. It's about what you bring into those spaces. If you want to be around focused, positive, driven people, you have to show up the same way. You can't expect a different kind of energy while contributing the opposite. It works both ways. And when you get that balance right, when you're surrounded by the right people and also becoming the right person yourself, that's when things start to shift faster than you expect. One of the biggest changes you can make in your life is realizing that learning doesn't stop at school. In fact, that's just the beginning. The real world is where the actual learning starts, and it never really ends. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that once they get a job or finish their studies, they're done growing. They settle into routines, rely on what they already know, and stop pushing themselves to improve. But the problem is, the world doesn't stay still. Everything around you keeps changing, industries evolve, technology moves forward, new skills become valuable, and old methods slowly stop working. If you stay the same while everything else moves forward, you naturally fall behind. The people who stay ahead are the ones who stay curious. They don't assume they already know enough. They keep learning, even when they're already doing well. Look at the way the most successful people operate. They read constantly, they ask questions, they explore new ideas, and they stay open to change. Not because they have to, but because they understand that growth depends on it. They treat learning like a daily habit, not a phase of life that ends at a certain age. And this mindset gives them an edge. Because when you keep learning, you don't just gain knowledge, you gain adaptability. You're able to adjust when things change instead of being thrown off by them. On the other hand, when someone stops learning, they start relying only on what they already know. And eventually, that knowledge becomes outdated. What worked in the past doesn't always work in the present. That's when people start feeling stuck without realizing why. But learning doesn't only come from books or courses. A huge part of it comes from experience. From mistakes. from trying things and getting them wrong, then adjusting and trying again. Every situation you go through teaches you something, if you're willing to look at it that way. Even the uncomfortable moments carry lessons that can help you later. The key is to stay mentally open. Not to assume you've figured everything out, but to stay in a mindset where you're always picking up something new. Because the more you learn, the more capable you become. You start seeing patterns. You make better decisions. You understand people and situations more clearly. And that directly affects your confidence. Not the fake kind of confidence that comes from pretending, but the real kind that comes from knowing you can handle more than before. Now there's another mindset shift that separates people who grow from people who stay stuck, and that's thinking like someone who creates value, not just someone who follows instructions. A lot of people limit themselves by thinking their job or role is just about completing tasks. Do what's asked, finish your hours, and move on. But that kind of thinking keeps you replaceable. The people who stand out are the ones who start thinking differently. They start asking, how can I improve this? Or, is there a better way to do this? Or, what would make this more effective? Even if they're not business owners, they start acting like owners in the way they think. And that small shift changes how others see them. Because now they're not just someone doing a job, they're someone adding value. When you think this way, you naturally become more useful, more reliable, and more noticeable in any environment you're in. You start taking initiative instead of waiting for instructions. You start solving problems instead of just reporting them. And over time, that makes you stand out without you even trying to force it. That's also how many successful leaders started. Not by immediately owning companies, but by treating their early roles with a sense of responsibility that went beyond the basic requirements. They didn't wait for permission to improve things. They just started doing it. And that mindset compounds over time. Because when you consistently think in terms of value, growth, and improvement, opportunities naturally start finding you. People notice how you work. They trust you with more responsibility. And doors open that wouldn't have before. Meanwhile, people who only focus on doing the bare minimum often stay in the same place for years, wondering why nothing changes. The difference isn't intelligence. It's mindset. At the end of the day, everything comes back to how you think. If you think small, your actions stay small. If you think long-term, you start building differently. If you think like a problem solver, you start seeing opportunities everywhere. And if you commit to learning continuously, you never really fall behind, because you're always updating yourself. So instead of waiting for motivation or perfect timing, the real shift is simple. Start thinking in a way that pushes you forward, even when things are uncertain. Because that's what actually builds progress over time. Many people underestimate how powerful ownership really is. When you stop thinking like someone who is just doing a job and start thinking like someone who is responsible for outcomes, everything changes. You stop waiting. You stop blaming. You stop watching from the sidelines. Instead, you start paying attention to what actually moves things forward. And that mindset shift alone can separate you from almost everyone around you. Because most people operate in reaction mode. They do what they're told, respond to problems when they appear, and then move on. There's nothing wrong with that at a basic level, but it keeps you limited. It keeps you dependent on direction from others. Ownership thinking is different. It asks a simple question in every situation: what would I do if this were mine? That question forces you to think beyond the minimum. It pushes you to look at the bigger picture instead of just the task in front of you. And when you start thinking like that consistently, people notice. Not because you're trying to impress them, but because your behavior changes. You become more proactive, more reliable, more valuable in any environment. This is also where real leadership begins, not from a title, but from behavior. Now, here's something important. Taking ownership doesn't mean you never fail or never make mistakes. In fact, It usually means the opposite. When you take more responsibility, you also take more risks. And with risk comes the possibility of failure. But that's not a negative thing. That's part of the process. The people who grow the fastest are not the ones who avoid mistakes completely. They're the ones who learn to recover quickly, adjust, and keep moving. And that connects directly back to mindset. If you see every mistake as a setback, you'll slow yourself down. But if you see it as part of learning, you'll keep progressing even when things don't go smoothly. Now let's connect this with something even bigger: how you see yourself. A lot of limitations people face are not external. They're internal. They come from the way they define their own abilities. If someone believes they're not good at business, they won't even try. If someone thinks they're not a leader, they won't take initiative. If someone believes they're bad at learning new skills, they avoid situations where they could improve. But those labels are not fixed. They're assumptions built from past experiences, not permanent truths. And the moment you start challenging those assumptions, your entire direction can change. Growth starts when you stop treating your current identity as permanent. You are not locked into who you've been. You are constantly shaping who you become based on what you choose to do next. That's why learning matters so much. Because every new skill you develop slightly expands your identity. Every challenge you take on changes how you see yourself. Every small win builds confidence that wasn't there before. And over time, those small changes accumulate into something much bigger. Now, let's bring this back to action. A lot of people wait for the right moment to start improving their life. They wait until they feel ready, until things calm down, until they have more time or more clarity. But that moment rarely arrives in the way people expect. Real progress usually starts when you begin with what you already have, not when everything feels perfect. Even small actions matter more than people think. Reading for 10 minutes a day. Learning one new skill step by step. Asking better questions at work. Taking responsibility for one extra thing instead of avoiding it. These might seem minor, but they build momentum. And momentum is what turns intention into real change. Because once you start moving, even slowly, it becomes easier to keep going. The hardest part is not speed, it's starting at all. Now there's another layer to this that connects everything together: discipline. Motivation comes and goes. It's unreliable. Some days you feel it, some days you don't. If you depend on motivation, your progress will always be inconsistent. Discipline is different. It's what keeps you moving even when you don't feel like it. Even when results aren't immediate. Even when things get repetitive or difficult. And discipline is built, not inherited. It comes from repeated choices, not sudden inspiration. Every time you choose effort over comfort, you strengthen it. Every time you follow through on something small, you make it easier to follow through next time. That's how real consistency is created. And consistency is what separates ideas from results. At the end of the day, success isn't one big moment. It's a series of small decisions repeated over time. How you think. What you focus on. What you tolerate. What you act on. All of it adds up. So if there's one thing to take from all of this, it's that change doesn't require a dramatic transformation. It starts with a shift in thinking, followed by small, consistent action. And over time, that combination quietly builds a completely different life. A lot of people misunderstand success because they only look at the end result. They see the outcome, not the process behind it. They see the finished product, not the years of effort that built it. And because of that, they assume success is something sudden. Something that happens to a person. But that's not how it works. Success is gradual. It builds quietly in the background while most people are distracted by shortcuts, comparisons, and frustration. The truth is, most progress is almost invisible at first. You don't wake up one day dramatically different. You slowly become different through repetition, decisions, and experience. That's why consistency matters more than intensity. Anyone can work hard for a few days or even a few weeks. But real change comes from showing up repeatedly even when it feels ordinary. Even when there's no excitement. Even when results are slow. This is where most people give up. Not because they can't do it, but because they expect faster feedback than life usually gives. But the people who keep going anyway are the ones who eventually break through. Now, another important truth is this: your environment plays a huge role in how far you go. It's not just about willpower. It's not just about motivation. The people around you, the conversations you have, the habits you're exposed to, all of it influences your direction more than you realize. If your environment constantly reinforces low effort, excuses, and negativity, it becomes harder to think differently, even if you want to. On the other hand, when you're around people who are focused, disciplined, and improving themselves, that energy naturally affects you too. You start adjusting without even noticing. Your standards rise. Your expectations change. That's why growth often requires a shift not just in habits, but in surroundings. Sometimes that means finding new influences. Sometimes it means setting boundaries. And sometimes it simply means becoming more intentional about what you allow into your daily life, what you watch, who you listen to, what conversations you engage in. Because everything you consume shapes your thinking. And your thinking shapes your decisions. And your decisions shape your life. Now let's talk about something that often gets ignored: responsibility. A lot of people spend years blaming external factors for where they are. The economy, their background, their education, their luck, their past. And while those things do affect starting points, they don't determine final outcomes. At some point, you have to shift from asking "why is this happening to me?" to "what am I going to do next?" That shift is powerful because it puts control back where it belongs, with you. Responsibility doesn't mean ignoring challenges or pretending everything is easy. It means recognizing that even in difficult situations, you still have choices. Maybe not perfect choices, but choices nonetheless. And those choices accumulate over time. One decision won't change your life. But hundreds of small decisions, made consistently, absolutely will. Now here's something worth paying attention to. Most people don't fail because they lack information. They fail because they don't act on what they already know. At some level, most people already understand what would improve their lives. They know they should learn more, work consistently, manage time better, avoid distractions, or take responsibility. The gap isn't knowledge, it's execution. And execution depends on habits, mindset, and discipline, not just motivation. That's why real progress often feels simple, but not easy. The steps themselves are usually clear. The challenge is sticking with them when things get boring or difficult. But that's exactly where growth happens. Because every time you push through resistance, you build strength, not just in skill, but in character. You become someone who follows through. Someone who doesn't quit at the first sign of discomfort. And that identity matters more than people realize. Once you start seeing yourself as someone who follows through, your behavior naturally starts aligning with that identity. You stop negotiating with excuses as often. You start finishing what you start. You start trusting yourself more. And that self-trust is powerful. It becomes the foundation for bigger risks, bigger goals, and bigger achievements. Now zoom out for a moment and look at the bigger picture. Everything we've talked about connects to one idea: progress is built, not found. It's built through how you think, how you respond to challenges, how you handle failure, how you choose your environment, and how consistently you act even when results are slow. There's no single moment that transforms everything. It's a direction you choose and continue choosing over time. And the earlier you understand that, the sooner things start to shift. Because once your focus moves away from shortcuts and toward long-term building, your entire approach changes. You stop looking for quick validation and start focusing on lasting improvement. And that's where real change begins.